those who display the flag deliberately choose oppression over liberation. At the same time, the economic freedom fighters has welcomed the judgment.
Accordingly, this means any display of this evil flag from henceforth is a violation of the Constitution. Long have we said that the apartheid flag, as well as all other apartheid symbols, must fall. Welcome this ruling as a milestone and victory in favor of all those who have been calling for the apartheid and colonial symbols in society to fall. It must be common cause that the apartheid national anthem must follow after its flag. The apartheid flag and its anthem belong to the same species. They are two sides of one coin. When white supremacists display the flag, they salute it by singing Distem because they belong in the same anti-black racism performance act. In light of this ruling, we call on Ramaphosa to remove Distem from our national anthem. Forcing black people to sing Distem is like asking them each day to salute the apartheid flag.
Well, for more reaction now, we're joined by Ernst Roets, who's the Head of Policy and Structures at AfriForum. Thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme. Disappointed by today's judgment?
Well, so AfriForum's brief reaction to the judgment is that we regard it as a setback for freedom of speech in South Africa. This doesn't affect AfriForum directly because AfriForum doesn't display the flag and AfriForum actively discourages people from displaying the flag. We do believe, however, that there must be clarity with regard to where the line should be drawn between freedom of expression on the one hand and when something becomes hate speech on the other hand. And we are concerned that the line isn't drawn in a proper manner and that this judgment would put us on a slippery slope to have a whole list of things banned in South Africa. And the effect thereof is that we would actually lose the right to say that we have freedom of speech in South Africa.
All right, let me start by asking, why does AfriForum not encourage people to display this flag?
Well, because we know that the flag is regarded as offensive by a great deal of people in this country, and we don't think that it is conducive to a solution. Even for Afrikaners, I, for example, don't regard the so-called Oranje Blanje Blauw flag as a symbol of Afrikaner heritage. And we've said in our statement as well that we don't have particular love for the flag. But the fact that it's offensive is not sufficient for it to be regarded as hate speech, because for something to be hate speech, it shouldn't merely be offensive, but it must be coupled with some form of a call to action, to commit some form of action directed at a particular community. If, for example, we say this flag is hate speech because it is offensive, we could make the same argument about the British flag or about various other flags. There are many people in South Africa, for example, who have fled from the Soviet Union, whose family members have died in gulags and so forth, who find the South African Communist Party's flag extremely offensive because of the hurt that it has caused them. So we are on a very slippery slope if we use this argument to try and ban things.
But you can appreciate that most black people in South Africa will look at this flag and for them it's beyond offensive. It's hurtful and it reminds them of an era of oppression and brutality, and to see it brings up those memories. And I guess this is why countries in Europe have banned the swastika.
Well, Alan Paton, who was a friend of Nelson Mandela, said, and of course a very respected leader in the liberation movement, said that to try to compare apartheid with Nazism is a prostitution of language. So we must be careful. We must acknowledge that there were some very grotesque atrocities that happened in this country. But this argument that because the swastika is banned in Germany, which was a completely different type of atrocity, therefore apartheid symbols must also be banned. The two aren't comparable. That's not to deny bad things that happened under the apartheid system, but it is to deny the extent of the atrocities committed in Nazi Germany, where people were lined up and mowed down in mass graves, where little children were thrown into ovens while their family had to watch. That's the type of what we saw under Nazism. So we must acknowledge that there were some serious atrocities committed in South Africa. But to simply say, well, it's the same as Nazism, therefore it has to be dealt with Nazism, is not historically responsible.
It's not so much a direct comparison, but the fact that a flag a symbol can be very offensive to a group of people, as it was for people in Germany and in Europe around the world. The same logic can be applied if a group of people in South Africa feel that this symbol, this flag, is so offensive to us, so hurtful to us, then it must be deemed to be something that we consider hate. Is that not an unreasonable argument?
It sounds like a reasonable argument, but the point is then we have to be consistent, because are we going to say, for example, that the British flag should be banned in South Africa? My great-grandfather was in a British concentration camp. If he hadn't escaped that camp when he was 3 years old, I wouldn't have been alive today. I have some very, very real emotions regarding what happened during the Anglo-Boer War, and of course it wasn't only people at war. But that doesn't justify a call to say that the flag should be banned. There are many symbols. There are people, as I said, people in South Africa who fled the Soviet Union, whose family members were murdered in gulags, in Russian, communist concentration camps, who now have to look at the South African Communist Party's hammer and sickle. And they would have a very strong argument to say that this causes very serious offense because their family members were murdered under that flag and tortured and so forth. The point is we have such a thing as freedom of speech in South Africa, and we have to choose: are we going to have freedom of speech and tolerate views that are offensive, or are we going to say we are going to ban this because it's offensive, and rightly so, but then we can't say that we have the right to freedom of expression, because it's not necessary to fight for freedom of expression when people say that they agree with government or that they share the ideological viewpoints of the ruling party. The importance of taking a stance for freedom of expression, particularly and expressively, comes in when dealing with offensive statements. AfriForum display the flag. We don't think it should be displayed, but that does not mean that we believe that it should be banned by law, because effectively this means that the police has to regulate people's homes. That's what the judgment says. That if you put up the flag in your bedroom, you are committing hate speech, and you could get a fine or whatever. What happens if you say, I'm not going to pay the fine because I don't believe with the judgment? Then the police is going to come knocking on your door. So what we are doing now is we are getting the police to regulate what people are doing in their bedrooms. That's the effect of this. And it's a very, very dangerous, totalitarian, slippery slope.
All right, so maybe we're getting stuck on the word offensive, because some people are insulted actually by this. Is that not a grounds for having this declared as hate speech?
No. The question with regard to, showing someone the middle finger is insulting as well. Of course, that's a facetious example, but the point is that regardless of whether something is offensive or insulting or hurtful, that does not justify these hate speech. There's a difference, because hate speech implies that it entails a call to action to commit violence or inflict harm, a call to action to inflict harm on a group of people based, for example, on their skin color. So something can be offensive and very offensive, like this flag, for example, but it's not hate speech if you only display a flag, if you only display a piece of cloth with different colors on it. If, however, you combine that with a call to action, then you could say that it's hate speech. If I display the flag, which I don't do in any case, but if I were to display the flag and combine that with some form of a message of hatred and say, well, we need to go and take up arms, or we need to go and do whatever towards people based on the color of their skin, yes, then that's hate speech. But if something is offensive or insulting, that is not sufficient for it to be regarded as hate speech.
Wouldn't you say that there's an argument that displaying this flag actually is an act of racism?
Well, you could say, although discussed during the court proceedings, there are actually numerous examples of black people displaying the flag. I remember a service delivery protest where a black person was displaying the flag. I remember there was a case where a black woman went to some dinner at some event dressed in the old South African flag. I have no idea why they would do that. I wouldn't do that. And even if it were to be racism, which probably is the case in many instances, racism per se, still, as wrong as it is, it's still within the ambit of freedom of speech, unless, as I said, it's coupled with a call to action. So to insult people based on the color of their skin is regarded, according to our constitution, as freedom of speech. It's only when it's an incitement to violence or something like that it becomes hate speech.
All right, Mr. Roets, we're going to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us today.